Kenai was a very integrated village. There were many names on the roster that came from different countries, some of them from the time of the Russian colonization, such as Kalifornsky and Shadura and Mamalov, Petrov, and so on. And then there were a good many Scandinavian names that dated from the times when some of the hardy seafaring men came to Kenai and settled here and raised families, such as Pedersen, Johansson, Juliusson, Nissen, and a good many others. There were some Filipino names, such as Lagada and Segura and Monfer. And there were a good many English and German names from who knows where, like Wilson and Jones and King and March and Hunter and Showalter. So the village was used to outsiders coming in. And in more recent years, there had been some other groups who had come here and settled. There was the CAA, which is now the FAA. They had about a dozen houses on the bluff adjacent to where the Kenai Senior Center is now. And some of those families were the Laughtons, the Jordans, the Harts, Joanna Hollier, who came up here as a traffic controller, and the Whites. And then there was the Road Commission, which is BPR now, and they were the Dubendorfs and the Solbergs and the Parsons and Ed Hollier and the Pelches. And there was a school group. There was the Fabriciuses and the Mitchells and the Gilliams and Maxine Rieger and Joyce Carver. And there were fish and wildlife people, and there were people who had come to work on the construction of Wildwood. So when the group I'm going to talk about came down from Anchorage to Homestead, they were just sort of absorbed without too much commotion. The area along the bluff from outside Kenai up north had been opened from Moose Reserve to homesteading, and it was available to anyone who wished to homestead. A few people from town had taken advantage of it. There was George Miller and Eddie Engelstad and John Munfer, but most of them were pretty content and comfortable where they were, and they didn't really bother too much. The group that I'm talking about consisted of 3 old-timers and 2 greenies. There was Roy Smith, who had homesteaded an 80-acre homestead in Anchorage off Tudor Road, and Shannon O'Brien and Wally Vansky, who had lived up in Anchorage for some time, long enough to know what Alaska was like. And then there was Mac McCoy and Carl Seaman, who knew absolutely nothing about it. When they came to Kenai, they were prepared to camp out into the woods. So they came with tents and equipment, and the first night they spent camped out in Kenai in the corner of what is now Pizza Paradiso parking lot. The next day, they were fortunate enough to meet Georgie Miller, and when they asked him about how to go about determining the homestead sites, he said, "Oh, you've got to go talk to John Munfer." And he told them where John lived, which was off Salamatoff Beach, south of where the Standard Oil docks are now. John had come to Kenai as a young man and became a commercial fisherman, met and married Bertha Mamaloff, and had just recently had a very nice, large, new house constructed on the bluff right above where Salamatoff Road lies right now. So the men made it out there. I'm not sure. I can't tell from the letters whether they were able to drive all the way. I think not, probably part of the way and then walk the beach. But anyway, they made it to the Munfers, and they were quite amazed to find such a large modern house out in the wilderness. but it had to be large. There was a family. There was John and his son Manuel. There was Bertha with her Memeloff clan, Nadia, who had married Eddie Engelstead but was often there, Freddie, Nick, and Bobby. And then there were the Munford children, Edna and Frida and Virginia and Johnny and Margie. Plus, there were a couple of hangers-on. There was Eugene they called Goggins, and there was Sammy Holstrom. There was old Mr. Memeloff, Bertha's ex-husband, and very often there was Sergei Petrov, who would hike in from Eagle Rock to spend a day or two. But in spite of the crowd, they welcomed these homesteaders with open arms. They invited them in for a hot meal, lots of coffee, and a discussion of where the best place would be to stake out a homestead. And the next morning, John's boys went snowshoeing with them to locate the section marker and chain out the homesteads. John kept a solicitous eye on them. He saw to it that they got a hot meal every once in a while, and his solicitude extended to a time when the families came up. I remember them bringing fish over many times and inviting us over to their place for a hot meal. And I remember one little episode that has stuck with me for so long. One day, Freddie came by to have coffee with us. And because we hadn't been to town for some time, we were out of white sugar. So we offered him brown sugar, thinking nothing of it. And he took it without a word, but the next day he came back with a package of white sugar to tide us over. John would often invite us over for a movie. He had a generator, and I don't know where he got the movies, but that was a big treat. We'd pack up all the kids and go over there and have something to eat and a joyful movie. So God bless John and Bertha. There were others who were very kind too. George Miller had homesteaded on the south end of Miller Loop, and he had built a cabin and cleared land where Mount Redoubt Baptist Church is now. And when the families of the Vanskys and the O'Briens came down from Anchorage after school was out, he offered them the use of the cabin and also the use of the field. Well, Roy and Shannon and Wally knew enough to know that we were going to need lots of provisions for the long winter ahead, so they talked everybody into planting lots of potatoes and some cabbage and carrots and so on. And since it was new ground, excuse me, I have a terrible cold, you'll have to forgive me. Since it was new ground and rather sour, nothing thrived too much except potatoes. Oh Lord, those potatoes grew. And at the end of the summer, when it was harvesting time, the men were at work at Wildwood, thank God, and so the women and the children got saddled with the chore of going down to see to the potatoes. This is a picture, I'm going to pass it around. The truck belonged to Marion Herget, and that's Toots Herget who's driving, and on the truck are the Seaman clan, the O'Brien clan, the Vansky clan. And I'm not sure how much help any of them were, but we came back with sacks and buckets full of potatoes. Maybe some of you can recognize some pictures if you look closely enough. Those potatoes ended up in our loft because we happened to have one until they started to get ripe and smell like dirty socks, and then we got rid of them in a hurry. But that first winter was pretty rough. We ate a lot of potatoes, we ate a lot of moose meat, we ate a lot of fish, and we ate a lot of homemade bread after we finally caught on how to make it. And pancakes. It was years before I could even look at a pancake. I was so tired of them. We had bacon and onion pancakes, we had cornmeal pancakes, we had blueberry pancakes, we had potato pancakes, we had cream corn pancakes, we had fruit cocktail pancakes. I'm sure there were more that I haven't thought of now. And all of it with a homemade maple syrup. That was a hard winter, and I do want to comment on the kindness of some of the, am I getting off here? Some of the Kenai people, particularly Mel Cole and his wife Grace, who distributed care packages several times, and the Fiacla and Phil Wilson, who helped out with a family whose children were bootless one winter. Sylvia has already told you how grateful she was to Rika Doolittle and the things that she did for her. So all in all, we felt that the people of Kenai accepted and treated us as we would hope we could treat others. I want to digress just one little bit. One time when I was being interviewed, the young lady asked me, "Didn't you have any fun?" She said, "All of this sounds so hard." And I said, "Well, I guess it was, but you know, we were all young and enthusiastic, and we were working for a goal, and it was kind of an achievement to be able to cope with all of these things. But we had a lot of other fun, too. I know anytime anybody moved into the neighborhood within a half a mile, we'd pack up the kids and go get acquainted. And in our little group, we had what we called a Saturday night club. There were 3 families, so one got designated as being the babysitter, and the other 2 would get together and play pinochle or canasta or whatever it was. We also, in a little later time, had the community club, and that was a lifesaver because it was the only place big enough for a group of people to get together other than John's house. And we had potluck dinners, card playing. When the children got older, had teen dances, turkey shoots, and carnivals, and of course there was always swimming for those who were hardy enough to try it. And in the wintertime there was ice fishing and skating. There were things going on in town, sometimes at the churches and sometimes at the schools. There was a homemakers club. I don't think many of us got to it, though. It was too hard to get in for meetings. And there was a community library that we could get to if we were lucky. We passed anything that you could read from a telephone directory on around the whole neighborhood. We were avid for anything that was printed. And then each family had a battery radio. How many of you remember the Muckluck Telegraph? That was a program that came from one of the Anchorage stations. At a certain time, the announcer would read notices that had been sent in, such as, Paul, we'll arrive at Sandpoint Tuesday at 1 o'clock, please meet us. Or, Mother, Helen, we got up to Anchorage okay, and we'll go to the land office tomorrow, whatever. And it was kind of like listening in on a community-wide telephone line. We felt like we were really a part of all of the things that were going on. So, you see, there was lots of fun to it in spite of the hard work. And I am grateful for all the kindnesses that were done to us.